Of all the motivational quotes that I drop on clients to help assure that they're giving me their best effort, one stands out the most. What doesn't challenge you won't change you. With that quote in mind, it stands to reason that the simplest approach to challenging yourself in the gym is taking a set to failure to see just what your limits are, to see what you're made of, if you will. This begs the question though, is taking a set to failure even a good idea? In today's video, we're going to discuss what going to failure really means, what its positive and negative implications are, and how I personally like to work this principle into my program. First, we need to define what training to failure is, because the truth is there are actually quite a few different types of training to failure, each with very different methods and outcomes. The first method is what I call form failure. This is where you stop the set when your form begins to deteriorate. Of all the types of failure, this is the one that I use most consistently, as it delivers in practically every avenue of training that most lifters prefer to excel in, while helping to mitigate the chance of injury or overtraining. Next is what's called concentric failure. This is probably what most lifters and bodybuilding types are familiar with, as it entails going all out on your sets until the full range of motion during the concentric portion of the lift, the actual lift itself, cannot be completed on your own. Next is what's called absolute failure. This is basically an extension of concentric failure, where a spotter is used to help you crank out a few more reps by assisting you a little bit on the concentric portion of the lift. Just like the concentric failure, old school bodybuilders are traditionally pretty big proponents of using absolute failure to achieve their goals of size, density, and added detail to whatever muscle it is that they're training with each lift. And lastly, there's isometric failure. The best way for me to describe these to someone familiar with bodybuilding is doing heavy forced negatives. This entails you loading, for instance, a barbell with more than your 1 rep max of that lift and fighting to lower it as slow as possible. To be honest, isometric failure is my least favorite of all the forms of failure. This, in my mind, is simply playing with fire, because you're asking your muscle tissue to contract at a level of extended force development that it is yet to make an adaptation to in regards to concentric lifting. So be careful with those. Okay, so there you have it. Those are our 4 different types of training to failure. Now let's discuss where to use each. And to determine where to use each, just as you do in any programming decision-making process, you first got to define what your training goal is with each particular exercise that you're going to program. In regards to training to failure, that means asking yourself, are you training to prioritize hypertrophy or strength and strength endurance? Remember, the fundamental benefit of training to failure is that it emphasizes an increased degree of time under tension with the muscles that you're stressing. With that being said, here's how I personally like to work in these different failure tactics. Because the fear or concern of injury and or cortisol spikes associated with overtraining are relatively low when we're talking about going to form failure, I like using these during all straight sets and even supersets where size and strength endurance are a priority. Beyond form failure, all of the failure tactics, with the exception of isometric failure like force negatives, I use exclusively on the last set of whatever it is I'm doing. This assures that you give your body the additional stress you need to initiate faster size and strength gains without putting yourself in position to experience any of the possible negative consequences like overtraining or acute tissue damage. To add to that point, as a point of principle, I rarely, if ever, do any lower body barbell specific movements like any squat or deadlift variation beyond form failure, for the simple fact that I believe doing them without solid form puts your back in too compromising of a position. You just risk too much for injury, and it's not worth the possible gains. Now, upper body barbell work and or lower body work with dumbbells, kettlebells, or other forms of external load that are a bit more forgiving with their motion at the point of failure are a different story. Now, as I mentioned before, outside of the form failure I do on practically every set of every exercise I do with straight sets, during the last round of any straight set that I may perform, the chief goal is finishing off the muscle groups responsible for that particular movement pattern. So really, the goal is just extending time under tension for as long as I can in as safe a manner as possible to stress those muscles responsible for the movement as much as I can. Now, I don't have a spotter, so I can't really go to absolute failure. And as I mentioned before, I'm not a fan of isometric failure because I feel like the risks don't outweigh the rewards. So what I'm gonna do here is a combination of obviously going to full-on failure and concentric failure with a few specific additional types of intensity tactics that I sprinkle in. This includes first going to traditional concentric failure, doing a 20-second rest pause set with the same weight afterwards until reaching true concentric failure, where I just can't push the dumbbell any further. Then doing a drop set with lighter weights with the same movement pattern. And finally capping all that off with a set of body weight movements, in this case, just regular push-ups, again, to just cram in as much time under tension with that movement pattern as possible. As you can see, this is extremely intense. So doing it on every set would just be asking too much of your body and would force a large decrease in performance with every set you do moving forward. So again, if you're gonna use any failure tactic beyond form failure, the best advice I can give you to help assure you experience faster gains instead of possible setbacks is to make sure that you use them only on the last set that you are performing of any straight sets or supersets that you might be doing. Hey guys, thanks for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed it and want more, then do me a solid by hitting the thumbs up button, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the alert icon so you get notified the instant that I drop new videos here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you're looking for a more in-depth view of exactly how I like to program kettlebells for all of my clients who are short on time yet hungry for some serious gains in the strength, size, muscularity, and conditioning department, then start by grabbing your free copy of the Kettlebell Cardio Blueprint I put together for you by clicking on either the book image that you see right over there to the right or the pin link at the top of the comment section down below. This free guide has a week's worth of my sub 10-minute home workouts, my top 10 rules for losing fat without losing size or strength, and my plug and chug workout builder to help you design fast and effective routines of your own from the comforts of home. So to grab it for free, just click over there or down there and I'll take you immediately to the download page, which allows you to put it to use immediately. Appreciate your time, guys. Have a good one. MANdler